She didn't walk in trying to make an impression. She didn't need to. She entered the room as if asking time itself for permission. She wore a white blouse and a quiet weariness, one that only the most attentive eyes ever notice. But no one there was attentive enough. Maria didn't explode. She whispered. And even so, her silence seemed to carry more weight than all the words that crowded that company every single day. Outside, Sao Paulo roared like a restless beast. Inside, the sound was different. The sound of her soul starting to wake up. Between the lines of her presence, there was something only someone who has lost everything would recognize. A strange absence, a kind of inner vacuum that comes right before big turning points. All week she'd been waking up with the same thought. Something was about to happen, and when the soul senses it, the body feels it. The coffee tasted more bitter. Her steps dragged. Her breathing felt heavier. Still, she kept going as if she were carrying something sacred on her back. Because she was. That gray Tuesday, while the subway dove into the city's damp tunnels, her phone buzzed. One ping, one message, just a short, to-the-point sentence. But inside her, it sounded like thunder. Maria read it and felt her heart pull back like a cornered animal. The past was calling. The present was trembling. And the future was bending into a new curve. Life does that. It waits until you've almost forgotten. Then it whispers, "Now." She didn't reply. She slipped the phone away, straightened her collar, and took a deep breath. In that second, a portal opened inside her, and she knew she'd been summoned, not to fight, not to prove anything, but to claim what had always been hers. The city slid past a window like an old black and white film. People rushing, horns honking, urgency everywhere. But inside her, something stilled. An ancient time lined up with the present. And, without noticing, she stopped being just Maria. She became the link between what had been and what was still to come. At that station, when she stepped off the train, the world was the same. But she wasn't. And what no one there knew was that the revolution had already begun. In silence. Like every revolution that changes what really matters. She grew up between plain walls and deep silences. The kitchen always smelled of fresh coffee and short sentences that spoke volumes without raising voices. Claudio, her father, wasn't a man who showed off. He taught without realizing he was teaching. He'd say, with a steady gaze and callous hands, that true character shows when no one's watching. And Maria learned it. Learned to behold even in invisible corners. Her last name was her mother's, but the spirit guiding her came from her father. She didn't inherit fortunes. She inherited principles. She didn't get glass-walled offices. She got stories told over a slice of bread and a sip of hope. What Claudio left Maria wouldn't fit in any will. It was a legacy of looking people in the eye, remembering the janitor's name, greeting the security guard like he was the president. That's the kind of greatness no one applauds, but everyone feels when it's missing. In Bexiga, between bakeries that smell like childhood and corners that kept old laughter, she listened more than she spoke. The conversations that shaped her soul weren't in books. They were in gestures, in the way her father greeted the baker, in how her mother balanced dignity and exhaustion. It was there, in that microcosm of quiet affections, that she grasped something the world would take a lifetime to understand. Real power is serving. Maria carried the blood of a man who believed in the value of small things, who knew that what you do when no one applauds defines who you are when everyone's watching. That blood didn't pulse for ambition. It pulsed for purpose. And that, still unseen, was already boiling inside her. Some things can't be explained, only felt. There, without anyone noticing, Maria was already heiress to something bigger than job titles. A worldview. No market understands that. But destiny recognizes it. It was sudden, a silent heart attack, like a whisper snuffed out without warning. Claudio didn't just hit the kitchen floor. He slid into the oblivion of a company that had slowly stopped listening to its own soul. In that instant, it wasn't only one man's body that collapsed. It was a symbol of an era. And Maria, on the other end of the phone line, heard the world's silence explode inside her. She stood there, frozen phone in hand and soul on the floor. Time didn't stop, but something in her did. She wasn't just orphaned of a father. She was orphaned of reference, foundation, meaning. And when her mother fell silent months later, Maria found out what it was like to live with no safety net, with no one to ask if she was okay. Because deep down, no one asked. Her morning was mute, invisible, swallowed between emails and spreadsheets, disguised in coffee, served with a smile that didn't want to smile. Going back to work was an act of courage nobody applauded. She walked the halls like a battlefield. Every desk, every office, every familiar face. Everyone carried on as if nothing had happened. But she knew something had cracked. And no one there realized what had truly been lost when Claudio died. Losing a founder isn't just losing a name on the door. It's losing the soul that held up the entire building. At that funeral with no long speeches, Maria felt something different. It wasn't pain. It was a calling. As if, in that silent goodbye, her father handed her an invisible key, and with it a mission. There were no spotlights, no read aloud. But there was one last look that said everything. Maria understood some deaths don't bury. They reveal. And she now wasn't just a daughter. She carried a flame that, even faint, could no longer be ignored. The company Claudio had built with calloused hands and non-negotiable values no longer breathed like before. The corridor once meant for meeting became a route for retreats. The voices were quieter, the eyes emptier. Where kindness had been, only targets remained. Where humanity had been, spreadsheets. And at the top, one name echoed with the chill of someone who confuses authority with power. Eduardo. He arrived smiling, but it was a smile that never reached his eyes. He wore expensive suits and handed out phrases, but never truly listened. His reign began as a strategic reorganization, but soon revealed itself for what it was, a purge. Cutting costs became a euphemism for cutting stories, cutting connections, cutting the invisible thread tying people to a shared purpose. Maria watched, quiet but alert. Every good morning that went unanswered, every superiority glance disguised as feedback, every tiny humiliation masked as a requirement. Eduardo didn't yell, he hollowed, turned people into numbers, presence into production, and little by little, the empire her father had built with soul started to collapse from within. What Eduardo didn't see was that his management sparkled but had no roots. And what has no roots can't hold. He walked the halls like he owned everything, trailed by uneasy silences. Maria, on the other hand, moved like she owned nothing. Yet every step carried the living memory of a time when that company had a heart. No one could see it, but she knew. She knew an empire built on sand can look solid, but one breath of truth, and it all crumbles. In the bottom drawer of Claudio's desk lay an envelope, sealed, no addressee, just her name, handwritten in the firm script of someone who knows what's at stake. Maria found it weeks after the burial and didn't read it, not out of neglect, out of reverence. She knew that paper wasn't just words. It was a portal, and portals need the right time to be crossed. She tucked the envelope deep in her bag, next to the lipstick she hardly used, and the key to an apartment that no longer felt like home. That was more than a testament. It was a reminder that, even absent, her father saw in her something she couldn't yet see herself. And that hurt, because when the world treats you as invisible, it's hard to believe you're light. But Claudio believed. While the company drowned in soulless efficiency, Maria waited. Not passively, strategically. She observed every move, every decision, every silence imposed by fear. She took notes, not on paper, in her soul. She knew some truths shouldn't be spoken right away. They need cultivating, like a seed, buried in the dark. And there, deep in her chest, something was already germinating. She kept serving coffee with the same gentle touches always, kept answering emails on time, even when Eduardo's tone was cutting. But inside, she was no longer the same. Each day, patience molded her strength. Each humiliation, she grew roots. And like every tree that grows in silence, Maria waited for the right moment to bloom. Some leaders aren't born on the stage. They're born in darkness. And it's exactly those that one day light up everything. Eduardo didn't shout, yet his cold, surgical words cut deeper than screams. He called Maria operational staff, corrected her in public with a smile, handed out degrading tasks wrapped in corporate language, said it was important to keep the humble in their place. She listened, swallowed hard, lowered her eyes, but inside, something lit up in silence. Every "you're not ready" sounded like a dare to what she already knew. Every look of disdain fueled a revolution she hadn't yet named. Maria wasn't naive. She knew the game, knew she was being underestimated on purpose, knew it was a test, not from the company, but from life. Some schools use blackboards. Some teach with humiliation. And there, in that field of cynicism disguised as hierarchy, she began to graduate. The coffee she carried into the meeting room never shook. She served it with dignity, with a posture saying more than 1,000 words. Maria didn't bend, and that bothered people. Her simplicity became armor. Her silence, a rare eloquence. She was small only in appearance. Inside, she already occupied the top floor of her own conscience, and that no one could downgrade. She learned to gather insults like stones along the road, not to throw later, but to build, farther ahead, the ground she'd walk on firmly. Maria didn't respond with anger. She responded by showing up, and slowly, her simple presence started to disturb more than if she'd yelled back. Some people imposed through force, others through coherence. Maria was that coherent presence, needing no raised voice to be heard. When truth ripens, it's heard even in silence. The auditorium was packed. Everyone had been summoned for an important announcement, they said. Eduardo stepped on stage with his usual rehearsed pose. He talked numbers, results, performance. He spoke to the figures, not the people. Meanwhile, Maria's heart beat differently. Her father's letter was still in her bag. But that day, it wouldn't be the paper that spoke. It would be her presence. When he called her mediocre in front of everyone, the room went silent, a dense, almost tangible silence. And for the first time, Maria didn't lower her gaze. She stood up, walked between colleagues like passing through a doorway, climbed the stage without haste, without fury, without rehearsal, just with the calm of someone who doesn't need to prove anything, because what she carried wasn't defense. It was revelation. She looked at Eduardo steadily, without resentment, and spoke, not with harsh words, but with the right words. She told who she was, where she came from, what she'd seen, what she'd lived. She spoke of her father, of the vision, of the legacy. She spoke of forgotten names, erased faces, ignored stories. She spoke like someone planting a seed in each listener's heart. She didn't accuse. She uncovered. Every revelation was a mirror. Every word, a door opening inside someone. A room used to applauding spreadsheets was left speechless before humanity. Eduardo tried to cut in, but his voice found no footing. He talked efficiency. Maria talked truth. In that moment, everyone realized the company's highest seat wasn't on a badge. It was in the heart of whoever carried purpose. And in that instant, real command changed hands, without fanfare, without decree, just with the quiet power of truth. It happened fast, not in the speed of events, but in the fragility of what stood only on appearances. Eduardo, who boasted so much about results, couldn't withstand someone who carried something he'd never have, truth. His voice lost force. His arguments shine. His eyes focus. Before the humanity Maria revealed, his figure shrank, and then it started to fall apart. Those who once feared him now looked at him with another kind of shock, late awareness. It was like everyone suddenly saw what had always been there, but no one dared to name. Arrogance, coldness, vanity. Eduardo tried to prop himself up with technical speeches, data, results. But the scale had shifted. Competence was no longer measured by performance, but by presence, by coherence, by soul. Maria asked for nothing, claimed no throne, no punishment. She just showed up whole, and that was enough. The company saw in her not just Claudio's daughter, but the rightful heir to a way of doing things long forgotten, a way where leading is caring, prospering is including, and growing is remembering where you came from. And so, without yelling, without a coup, without a revolt, Eduardo's throne crumbled to dust. Mendez Corporation was finally waking up. In waking, it chose who to follow, not by resume, but by essence. Maria knew the corridors by name. She knew what hurt each employee. She knew who'd lost someone, who feared being fired, who smiled out of obligation. That's what made her huge. Companies are made of people, and she was, above all, profoundly human. Therefore, at last, irreplaceable. The air at Mendez shifted, almost imperceptibly, but anyone paying attention felt it. Footsteps in the halls sounded lighter. Meetings felt more humane. Backstage conversations grew hopeful. It wasn't about a new management policy. It was something much older, respect. Maria's presence as the new leader wasn't announced with fanfare, but with real change. Benefits slowly returned. But what touched employees most wasn't the health plan. It was hearing their own names again. Carlos, Juliana, Dona Conceição. They existed again, not as ID cards, but as people. Maria made a point of walking the floors, sitting at common desks, listening to what had been ignored. She knew real leaders don't rule from above. They walk beside. Results began to show, not because she pushed harder, but because she cared more. Kindness started to pay dividends. Empathy turned competitive edge. Investors who once saw only graphs now listened to stories. Stories of transformation, of comeback, of reconnection. The company was no longer a target machine. It was a living organism, pulsing with purpose. Maria used no exclusive office. She preferred the shared coffee bar, the bench in the garden, the desk near reception. She knew a company with soul is one where leadership is felt even when it's not physically present. In this new era, Mendez finally had a face, a voice, a heart, not because it followed a formula, but because it remembered who it had always been. And no crisis can erase that. She didn't win, not the way others expected, not with trophies, headlines, or triumphant speeches. Maria transformed without needing to topple anyone, just by occupying a space that had always been hers, with presence, listening, coherence. That's why her story echoed, not as noise, but as a compass. Today, many see her as a symbol, but Maria doesn't see herself that way. She stays simple, alert, steady. She still remembers breakfast with her father, words whispered over slices of bread. Truths learned when no one was watching. She knows she doesn't lead to be seen. She leads to see better, to see the other, to repair what hurry and neglect have broken. Corporate life may never be the same. A story like hers doesn't pass unnoticed. It takes root. Plants doubt in those who lead with coldness. Plants hope in those who serve with heart. Yes, Maria became a case study. But more than that, she became proof it's possible to do things differently. That kindness can be strategy, listening can be leadership, and firmness can walk hand in hand with compassion. That seed buried in silence is now a tree. It grew in the dark, fed by tears, patience, dignity. And now it offers shade to anyone arriving tired, to anyone fighting quietly, to anyone who, like Maria, carries an unseen pain that one day might bloom if respected, if heard, if above all honored, the way she honored, the way she keeps honoring, in silence, with soul. If this story spoke to something inside you, then you already know this channel is for you. Here, every video is a mirror for those who feel deeply yet speak little, for those who carry the world on their backs and still rise every morning. Subscribe, not to follow just another channel, but to remember every week the silent strength living in you,